Elmo's just checking in. How's everybody doing? And the internet collectively responded, not fucking good, you little red muppet. Unleashing a torrential flood of replies, just dumping an entire generation of existential misery on a muppet.
There's actually research that shows that coping mechanisms lead to poor outcomes. Coping mechanisms can make your life worse. So good examples of emotion-focused coping include technology and substances. Because we're not fixing anything about our life, we're not even processing the emotions, we're just simply making the emotions go away. When we cope, when something's bothering me in life, and I learn how to cope, I no longer need to fix it because it's not bothering me anymore.
In today's video, we're going to be exploring the topic of art in the face of horror, why we create. Part 1. Empathy is a double-edged sword. Since I was a child, the world has made it abundantly clear that I am too sensitive and I think too much. I always thought that was a personal failing of mine until recently I found out that about 20% of the world's population, 1 in 5, people are considered highly sensitive individuals. This means that these are people with highly sensitive nervous systems, which grant us a host of positive and negative attributes. People who have highly sensitive nervous systems are 1. Highly empathetic. 2. Are more easily stressed and overwhelmed, especially by conflict. 3. Need significant alone time to recharge and cope. And 4. Are deeply moved by beauty and art. I would not be surprised if a lot of artists fall under this category. I know it's kind of like a meme in video essays where we all define basic words, but just for the sake of all of us being on the same page, empathy, according to Wikipedia, is generally described as the ability to take on others' perspectives, to understand, feel, and possibly share the response to their experience. There are more, sometimes conflicting definitions of empathy that include, but are not limited to, social, cognitive, and emotional processes primarily concerned with understanding others. Empathy is the foundation for strong interpersonal relationships. It's how we can connect and relate to other people. So people who are highly empathetic tend to have stronger and closer interpersonal relationships than other people. But empathy also comes with a downside.
Having an excess amount of empathy, significantly more than what most people have, can actually be debilitating or even disabling at times. It seems like a great thing on the surface. You're very in tune with other people, you can understand, read, even experience their feelings to a degree, but it comes at a price.
So you know that feeling when you're like really determined to have a good day? You wake up and you, on your drive to work, you're like, yeah, all right, I feel good today. Today's gonna be a good day. But then you get to work and one person is very miserable and it like slowly infects everyone else until just everyone's miserable. And you're like, what the heck happened to my good day? That's called emotional contagion. Emotional contagion refers to the phenomenon in which a person unconsciously mirrors or mimics the emotions of those around them. Emotional contagion can be triggered by nonverbal, such as facial expressions, as well as by overt conversation and behavioral cues, like a smile can spread from one person to another. Or somebody who is complaining a lot can bring people down. People are often unaware of their susceptibility to others' moods and emotions, and an understanding of this phenomenon can help someone both regulate their own emotions and avoid dampening the moods of others. So yes, people's moods are contagious, and if you're extra sensitive, you are extra susceptible to other people's moods. On the vein of emotional contagion, you can actually experience vicarious trauma through other people. Vicarious trauma can happen to anyone who's exposed to others' traumatic events and others' suffering. It can often be a cumulative effect that is a result of repeated exposure to the worst of human experiences. But not always. Vicarious trauma can be a reaction to witnessing even a single traumatic event, maybe seeing a car crash or being on the receiving end of a triggering trauma dumping session. Some of you might be able to see where I'm going with this. If you've been on the internet, hello. Scrolling through your home feed is just like vicarious trauma just embedded into you just by scrolling through news headlines. Oh, really interesting scientific invention, adorable puppy, like a little listicle of facts and information, and then like the most devastating news headline you could possibly read, all in the span of like 4 seconds. According to the Very Well Mind on Can You Have Too Much Empathy, since the pandemic, more people have felt empathetic distress. With so much overwhelming bad news, it's hard not to. While you might feel like having empathy means you care, emotional overloading can lead to feelings of fatigue and helplessness. And the human brain has evolved to try to keep us safe, away from things that hurt us and make us feel horrible. The natural conclusion to all of this empathetic overwhelm is burnout, is literally an empathetic burnout, which leads to apathy and avoidance. For the past couple years since I became pregnant, I've actively tried to avoid things that are upsetting to me because I didn't have the emotional capacity to deal with it. And, pregnancy, like high stress, can impact the health of your child. So it made sense at the time. And then after you have a kid, your empathy just dials all the way up to 1,000 as because biology is amazing and interesting, and you're supposed to connect and care for this tiny little infant. So the pain and the suffering of the world was just extra potent for me, and I had to shut myself off. Basically a hermit, now that I'm a stay-at-home mom, I don't get out much, and it's easy to stay in your own little protective bubble. And while I think that it is, it can be beneficial, there's a balance to this. So while I think it's important to protect yourself and have boundaries with the world, the pain and suffering of the world, I think you can go too far the other way, where you become empathetic and turn a blind eye to what's going on around you. So the other night I was researching all of this, the dark side of empathy, being highly sensitive, compassion, burnout, when I was in my bed, looking at my phone, scrolling on YouTube Shorts, as I know I shouldn't be doing as somebody, who's highly sensitive. It's like playing Russian roulette on whether or not I'm going to be crying that night or not. And that is where this video is going to take a turn. So the YouTube short was drawings done by the survivors of the Hiroshima atomic bomb. It was basically a slideshow that seemed to be in chronological order of the bombing and the immediate aftermath. The people doing the drawings obviously weren't super well-trained artists or anything, so the drawings had this haunting, almost childlike quality. But even being untrained, the artists were able to capture the magnitude of horror that was surviving the atomic bomb. Reflexively, I went to the comments, which explained in great detail what the drawings depicted. I read a handful of them until finally my better judgment caught up with me and I put my phone down. I won't repeat any of the gruesome details, but one comment summed it up rather perfectly. Many survivors thought they had died in the blast and had been transported to hell. 15 seconds. The short was 15 seconds long and was more horrifying and devastating than any story I had ever read. Being confronted with the brutality that was people who survived the bomb was rattling. I laid in bed for most of the night, silently weeping, and barely slept. that experience like stuck with me. And instead of just like trying to numb and suppress it, like, you know, we usually do with more social media or, you know, drugs of choice or whatever, I wanted to like just let this feeling play out and be and to process it so it doesn't just like stay in my body. So I sought out more information. The people who survived the atomic bombings were called the hibakusha, which translates to bomb-affected people or survivors of the bomb. It was a term used to describe the people who survived the initial blasts, but went on to experience the effects of radiation sickness, the loss of loved ones, and discrimination. A lot of the discrimination they faced was because they believed that the radiation effects were going to be hereditary or contagious. Many hibakusha chose not to disclose their status due to its potential impact on their employment or marriage. The next day, I was looking at different Hiroshima documentaries to watch, and I came across pictures from a Hiroshima schoolyard. I thought it would be similar to the pictures, to the drawings of the survivors I had previously watched, so I decided to watch that one. But to my surprise, it wasn't about the same drawings.
I had seen drawings by children who were affected by war before, and they're usually dark. It's usually a lot of erratic movement in the drawings. These were colorful, lots of round things.
I was struck by the colors and their vibrancy and how they spoke to the flourishing of life rather than the destruction of life.
A collection of surprisingly joyful drawings created by school children living among the ruins of Hiroshima in 1947 become the heart and soul of this true, inspiring story about an exchange of gift between Americans and Japanese during a devastating war. This powerful documentary about reconciliation and the power of gift introduces the children artists, now in their late 70s, who reflect on their early lives amongst the rubble of their destroyed city and the hope they shared through their art. In 2010, the newly restored drawings, buried for decades deep inside All Souls Church in Washington, D.C., are taken back to Japan, where they are reunited with the artists and exhibited in the very building they were created. The documentary is available to watch for free on Tubi, and I'll link it in the description. But beware, there are ads, and the tonal whiplash from those ads, especially like the fake dating show ad that I kept getting, was ridiculous. I really like this documentary because it does not shy away from all of the horrible things that happened, and just like the miserable experience that it was to live through this, but it also gives kind of like this more like nuanced, hopeful view of life, I guess, of the human experience. A pretty powerful part of this documentary was when they were talking about the radiation. Radiation was a new concept. They didn't know how it was going to affect the area.
There was this rumor that nothing would grow here for 75 years. And there was very serious talk about moving Hiroshima and having it, just go up and down the coast somewhere and abandon this area. All of this was a very uncertain time. Are we going to rebuild this city or are we not going to rebuild this city? And then plants started growing. So the people who said that nothing is going to grow in 75 years were wrong. They really got hope from these plants. Now they're definitely determined to rebuild the city.
鉄道草といって雑草なのですけども、その雑草がたくましく瓦礫の間からどんどん伸びていってるんですね。で、 大人たちがそれを見て、草がこうやって焼け跡からぐんぐん伸びていると言って、だから自分たちも頑張ろうって言ってる感じを私は子供心に感じまして、大人たちはそうやって今のこの状態からまた新しい出発だ。
One of the children even expressed how she missed those times when everyone was happy.
すごい懐かしいんだけど、もうすっごくみんなね、なんか嬉しかった。で、この子がとにかくだけど全部中だけにはいないから、でも終わったら、勉強で終わったらシャーッとみんな外で出たからね。外出てたよ。それで前が川じゃないですか。川で泳いだりしたもん。それから
I really think that her experience kind of speaks to like the joy and the beauty of childhood, and the innocence of childhood. Okay, I'm gonna try not to cry in this video. It's gonna be very difficult because, oh my god, we're not even at the worst of it yet. No matter how bad things get, the ability to find the joy and the levity in the everyday moments, you know, it could be as simple as grass growing again or flowers blooming, can be a symbol of hope and resilience and the importance of community and, you know, people banding together in hard times to support each other and to play together. The quote that I have that I might edit in is, of course, the atomic bombing was a terrible thing, but I think it was wonderful how strong we were, how positive, focused on the future and doing our best at our studies, and how friendly we all were to each other. So basically, how the American church gets involved is I think a kind of beautiful story. A year after the bombing, there is a article posted in Time magazine which shows two high-up naval officers and a woman cutting into a cake that is shaped like the atomic bomb.
I have with me here in the pulpit this morning a page from a newspaper, from a very fine newspaper. It contains a picture, as it seems to me, an utterly loathsome picture. If I spoke as I feel, I would call it obscene. It is a picture of two high naval officers and a very beautiful lady. They are in the act of cutting what is called an atom bomb cake. And it is indeed a cake shaped in the form of an atomic explosion. The caption says it is made of tiny angel food puffs. How would it seem in Hiroshima or in Nagasaki to know that Americans make cakes of angel food puffs in the image of that terrible, diabolical thing that brought sudden death to thousands of their friends and a lingering, loathsome death to thousands of others? If I had the authority of a priest of the Middle Ages, I would call down the wrath of God upon such an obscenity. Such a monstrous betrayal of everything for which the broken-hearted of the world are waiting.
Davies, during his time, was really one of the most prominent progressive preachers in the country.
And at the time, pastors were reported on, and his reaction got broadcasted into Times Magazine and all over the world, and it got to the ears of somebody, I forgot who specifically, but of one of the people in Japan. And he said, and the message was relayed back to the church that if they do like feel bad, the children had nothing. So if they could just donate any of their school supplies, like whatever leftover school supplies they had, that could be a huge help. They had the congregation kind of pull together and send over like I think they said half a ton, so 1,000 pounds of school supplies over to Japan to the children of Hiroshima. And because of that gift and that gesture, that is why they're able, like, oh God, I'm trying not to cry. And because of that gesture, that is what brought these beautiful, colorful pictures to us.
それは学校の先生がね、アメリカから 原爆を受けた子どもたちに贈り物をしましょうということで届いたんだと。でみんなに分配するってでさっき言った鉛筆とか鉛筆の後ろにゴム消しがついてますよね。いやそれはアメリカからもらったっていうんですごいなと思って、でゴム消しをこう消してね匂いを嗅ぐといい香りがするんだよね。あれをこう一生懸命机にこすりつけてこうやって嗅いでたっていうか。
アメリカから来るものは色がみんな綺麗でね、今のビー玉のあれでもねものすごく感心したわけですよね。日本にないような色が綺麗な色があったもんですからね、もう嬉しくて宝のようにしてましたそれは。
For a show of thanks, the children sent a bunch of their drawings that they did in their art class in the spring of that year back to America, and the church kept them and kept them safe in their archives, but eventually kind of got lost to time. And then it got, somebody found them again, and it's like such like a historical moment.
As the stewards of these drawings, that it is our responsibility to continue to share this story with the whole world. And so we're very honored to share that responsibility with all of you. So thank you.
本当に素晴らしいことができたと本当に思っております。大変嬉しく思っています。もうどんどん来ていただいて、もっと我々の私が感じていることをね、皆さんも感じてもらいたい。平和について考えてもらいたいし、反核についても考えてもらいたい。そうになってほしいですね。
The survivors of Hiroshima are not the only artists who were affected by the end of the war in Japan. And this is where I would like to transition to Studio Ghibli. For those of you who don't know, Studio Ghibli is a animation studio that I basically, when I describe it to the older generation, is Japanese Disney. They are known for their very whimsical, family-friendly, gorgeous animation. They really are able to capture just magic through their stories and animation. My first Studio Ghibli movie, I watched Spirited Away on Cartoon Network when I was a kid, and I remember it being like nothing I had ever seen or experienced before. Studio Ghibli was founded by Hayao Miyazaki and Isao Takahata, who were both children during the end of World War II. Miyazaki was born in 1941. Some of his earliest memories are that of the firebombing that him and his family had to evacuate. One of their early films in the 80s was My Neighbor Totoro, which has all of the hallmarks of a Studio Ghibli film and is a lot of people's favorite comfort movie. But what a lot of people don't know is that movie was made in tandem at the same time with Grave of the Fireflies, which is basically a heart-wrenching, devastating film about the reality of being a child living through the end of World War II. The film synopsis of Grave of the Fireflies is a devastating meditation of the human cost of war. This animated tale follows Seita, a teenager charged with the care of his younger sister, Satsuko, after an American firebombing during World War II separates the two children from their parents. Their tale of survival is as heartbreaking as it is true to life. The siblings rely completely on each other and struggle against all odds to stay together and stay alive. This movie was based on a short story that was inspired by actual real events. The author wrote it to grapple with the grief and the guilt he felt not being able to save his sister. It is not like a one-to-one recreation of reality. They aged up Setsuko. In reality, she would have been 18 months. Oh, God. This is going to be the hardest part for me to get through. The film starts off with our main character dying.
September 21st, 1945. That was the night I died.
And it's kind of like a retelling of the events that led up to the moments of his death. The story really evolves around the siblings and love and their love for each other. Seita, the older brother, really tries to do his best to keep like levity and joy and to create magical moments for Setsuko, even with everything going on. There's a lot of moments of just kids being kids. I'm gonna have to edit some things in from other videos because I cannot get through this section. This movie is often described as a masterpiece you will never watch again. Through the end of World War II, there were a lot of food rationings and famine going on, so food got very, very scarce, and the two end up dying of starvation, one after another.
どうぞ。何や、節子。ご飯や。おから炊いてあげましょうね。どうぞ、お上がり。食べへんの？節子。
Yeah, the movie's about the true cost of war, and often it is the most vulnerable among us who have to deal with the worst of it. So it is a bit of a emotional, whiplash to also be viewed with My Neighbor Totoro. This acclaimed animated tale follows schoolgirl Satsuki and her sister Mei as they settle into an old country house with their father and await their mother to recover from an illness in an area hospital. As the sisters explore their new home, they encounter and befriend their playful spirits in their house and nearby forest, most notably a massive, cuddly creature known as Totoro. So, My Neighbor Totoro takes place in 1958, notably, so over a decade after the events of Grave of the Fireflies. Hayao Miyazaki was at the helm. He directed My Neighbor Totoro, while Isao Takahata directed and worked on Grave of the Fireflies, and they worked on them at the same time and released them together. When people talked about Grave of the Fireflies being one of the best anti-war movies ever made, Takahata was confused by that because to him, it wasn't an anti-war movie. It was a movie about what happens when you gradually become excluded from your own society. The death of the mother in the beginning of Grave of the Fireflies also kind of represents the absence of the nurturing force in society at the time. And the children being forced to grow up way too soon. In My Neighbor Totoro, at the end, you see Mei runs away because she wants to go see her mom in the hospital after a fight with her older sister. And she's lost. She gets lost. And the whole community comes out to look for her. But in the Grave of the Fireflies, no one will even spare anything to help these dying children. These films depict basically an alternate universe feeling of two societies, but what separates them is just time. Like, it's the same people, the same place. It's like the contradiction of the human experience. In My Neighbor Totoro, the mother is sick in the hospital for a long time, and the children are battling with the uncertainty and fear of losing their mother, which mirrors Miyazaki's own life, where his mother suffered from spinal tuberculosis and spent a number of years in the hospital before being allowed to be nursed at home. And you can see in the credits, there's like a picture of the mom getting out of the car and coming home to visit the girl. I think to me what these films like represent is, you know, the degradation of society, but also the healing of society. And nature is like a huge motif in the Studio Ghibli movies. They believe that if you take care of nature, nature will take care of you. And I think that is absolutely true to lots of extents. It also speaks to the resilience of life in all forms. And just like nature's ability to adapt and to be reborn again, like the bombed out fields and cities are rebuilt, the trees grow, crops end up growing again. Life has a way of persevering. Not that it makes up for all of the horror that took place before, but I think art and media like this is so important, to preserve the stories of these children for future generations to witness and learn from and to feel. And essentially, these two films represent two different forms of therapy and art therapy. Grave of the Fireflies is like a sort of confrontation. It is a way to express your trauma, to get it out of you, to speak your truth, as the kids say these days, to take back, your power and to express your trauma in a way which can be shared and experienced by other people and to affect change and feelings in others. And the other form, Miyazaki's form, is, fantasy and healing and comfort is also a very important balance in the two extremes that are, it's like the duality of healing. Like in order to heal, you need to confront the pain, you need to feel the emotions and let them, run their course so that you can heal and feel comfort and love and all of that good jazz. And through viewing this story, we can learn the lessons of the older generations, and the art preserves all of the feeling, all of the humanness that was these historical events. It's easy to forget the human experience in all of this when you're just reading a textbook or you're just reading the facts line by line. And for me, I felt like this confrontation was absolutely necessary. As I stated before, I have been pretty avoidant, I think, in my life, trying to avoid things that make me feel pain and sadness and suffering. I mean, obviously there's a balance to all of this, but I was out of balance. I feel like I was specifically putting my head in the sand, in the sand for a lot of things that are happening. When you watch, Grave of the Fireflies, you can be like, oh, that was in the past. That happened many years ago. And you can kind of move on with your life and be like, well, I'm glad things are better now. But there are still a lot of children living in armed conflict right now. It's happening in the present moment. Just of different names and different nationalities. In Grave of the Fireflies, you see people just walk by these dying children. Just they're a pile of, trash. They're just something unsightly, but have no personal responsibility towards. Obviously, you can't take on all of the world's pain and trauma by yourself as one individual, but it definitely moved me to action. I found a charity called Save the Children, which I will talk about more in a bit at the end of the video. And I decided to cancel my YouTube Premium subscription in order to donate $15 a month to that charity, which they do a lot, but specifically they also help children in areas of conflict and war. They're a pretty big organization, but I'll get into it later. The point of our of these negative emotions is to invoke change in the world. That's why we have anger and empathy and sadness. It's so that we don't become complacent and apathetic. I don't want to leave this video on a horrifyingly sad note. It is amazing to me how much life can improve in a decade. Just because things get bad doesn't mean that they won't get better. And even if things are bad, you can still find joy in everyday moments. When I first started making this video, it was going to be about empathy and, being highly sensitive and coping with those feelings. But it turned into something a lot bigger than me and my feelings. I truly do believe that this sensitivity that I have is a gift, even if it doesn't feel like it all the time. But it is important to have a balance, to manage your emotions, and to put down the weight of the world sometimes. I know that when you're faced with all of the cruelty and the worst parts of humanity, seemingly on a daily basis, you can feel helpless and you can lose hope. But I think there's this video by Kurtzgatz. It's in a nutshell. I think this video does a great job in encapsulating my version of optimism.
We split the atom and traveled to other worlds. Everything is different today. Except us, of course. We humans have not changed. We were molded by a cold and unforgiving world where we needed to be hard and brutal to survive. We are still bound to our nature that made us so successful. We still tell stories, are hungry for food, greedy for resources, desperate to be accepted by our peers. We're scared by the dangers that lurk in the dark, imagined and real ones. We're still brutal to each other and the animals we hold power over. We're still territorial and possessive. We fear losing what we have, and we fear change. We downplay the damage we cause and ignore the people in need outside our tribes. Humans are not nice, and if we look at our history, how could we expect ourselves to be? In nature we see great beauty, but also endless violence and struggle devoid of morals or kindness. We are an instinct-driven apex predator that survived in an uncaring world, only now we have coal plants, nuclear weapons and social media. This would be hard to handle for any animal, so it makes sense that we continue to follow the impulses so deeply ingrained in us. But this is only because we've not yet caught up with the mind-numbing gift we've been handed. The real tragedy of humanity today is that we are these amazingly powerful beings that have not awoken to their potential. We're trapped in the present and the mindset of a scarce world. But aside from the physical limits of the universe, there's nothing stopping us from creating a literal paradise for ourselves. This seems so daft, but it's true. If we dare to tell ourselves a different story about who we are and who we could be.
I think having a zoomed out big picture view of humanity and also a spiritual aspect of life has really helped me cope with the horror that is the human experience. I think the worst part of facing the horrors or whatever, or seeing all of this tragedy and stuff online is the helpless feeling. But there are things you can do. One, channel your feelings into creativity of some sort, getting them out of you in a way really helps with processing trauma and expressing yourself and not keeping it bottled up. I think the best art is honest, is an expression of somebody's experience and feeling, And that doesn't have to be perfect. It could be through art, like, painting and drawing, or writing, or music, or there's sculpting. There are many, many avenues you can go down. Meme edits, video editing. And then 2, pictures from a Hiroshima schoolyard really kind of encapsulates the importance of charity and giving and gift giving. I picked the charity Save the Children because they are a pretty big charity. So the charity was founded in 1919 at the end of the First World War. They're a pretty big organization that does a lot of stuff. You can do the gift catalogs where you can specifically buy specific one-time things, like you can send mosquito nets or soccer balls or art supplies, bikes, blankets, books. You can go in and individually click on the things you want to be funding, or you can. I selected to do a monthly subscription. Basically, think of it as investing into a better, healthier world, which I think is definitely worth the investment. I also looked on the Charity Watchdog, that website, and they were graded an A-, which is pretty good. 85% of the money donated to them goes directly to the people and children in need, whereas the other 15% goes to overhead costs and salaries and stuff like that. Obviously, they need to there are people working full time in this organization that deserve to get paid. So they claim that they can reach any part of the planet in any remote place within 72 hours. They also champion gender equality, actively try to fight against child marriages and get girls into school. And they also work in the United States, helping, domestic poverty and getting children ready for kindergarten. Not only are you helping, children out in the world, but you're also helping American children if you're American and care about, domestic problems as well. It's a bipartisan issue, baby. I think everyone can get behind children are innocent and do not deserve to live in the chaos and tragedy that is war, And then the last thing I wanted to end on is the Mayors of Peace. So Mayors of Peace is an organization, basically it's an assembly of different cities and towns across the world that are trying to band together to create real momentum for the realization of a peaceful world without nuclear weapons. They currently have over 8,400 member cities, but they need about 1,600 more cities to reach their target. You can go on the website and look up if your city is a part of the Mayors for Peace already. I looked mine up and mine already was, so that's exciting, but they have a list of all of the current cities that are already a part of it. If you're not, they have a thing you can email, a PDF you can email to your mayor to see if they would like to join. I think everyone can agree that we shouldn't be using weapons of mass destruction like this. There's really no point. A mutual assured destruction, or MAD, is a military strategy and national security policy that assumes that if one nuclear-armed superpower attacks another, both sides will be destroyed. Humanity, we've gotten to the point where we're so smart and so powerful, we're figuring out how to split apart atoms to create the most crazy explosions ever. And it's okay, we've gotten to this point, now what? Cool, you can destroy the whole world if you wanted to. Is that what is that what we want? No. Absolutely not. Now more than ever, peace and cooperation is the goal. So you can gather signatures and invite different mayors to join the Mayors for Peace initiative as we try to make the world a safer and better place.
の中にありますねって。だからその胸の中に平和という灯火をどうか燃やし続けて、大人になっても燃やし続けてくださいっていう風な皆さんが次の平和を築く後継者の方なのでっていう話をしたと思います。
So, thank you very much for watching. And if you got all the way to the end, you are a superstar. Sending everyone all of my love, and I hope you have a good holiday season this year. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.